Beneath the calm smile of an empath often lies a story that very few people ever get to see. Most people know the empath as the listener, the helper, the peacemaker, the person who stays kind even when life gives them every reason not to. They are the ones who absorb pain, carry emotional burdens that do not belong to them, and continue offering understanding long after others would have walked away. Because of this, many people assume an empath's patience has no limit. They assume an empath will always forgive, always understand, always come back. But that belief hides a dangerous truth. Every human being has a breaking point, and when that point is finally reached, the transformation can be so dramatic that it leaves everyone around them stunned. The most frightening part is that this change rarely happens overnight. It builds slowly and silently, day after day, year after year, through disappointments that are never discussed, through betrayals that are quietly tolerated, through emotional wounds that are hidden behind a smile. While everyone else believes the empath is doing fine, an invisible storm is gathering beneath the surface. The empath continues giving, continues supporting, continues sacrificing. Yet with every act of kindness that is ignored, every boundary that is crossed, and every moment of disrespect that is excused, another piece of their trust begins to disappear. Most people never notice the warning signs because empaths are often experts at hiding their pain. They make others feel comfortable, even when they themselves are falling apart. Then one day, everything changes. The person who once answered every message stops responding. The person who always tried to fix every conflict becomes silent. The person who gave endless chances suddenly walks away without looking back. To outsiders, it can seem shocking. Some even describe it as cold, harsh, or cruel. But the reality is far more complex. What many people call the dark side of an empath is often the result of years of emotional exhaustion reaching its limit. It is the moment when compassion collides with reality. The moment when a person who spent their entire life caring about others finally begins to care about themselves. This transformation has fascinated psychologists, relationship experts, and millions of people who have experienced it firsthand. Yet despite how common it is, there are still many myths surrounding it. Some believe an empath becomes bitter. Others believe they become heartless. Some even assume they have changed into someone completely different. The truth is far more surprising than most people realize. In many cases, the empath is not becoming darker at all. They are simply removing the version of themselves that was constantly sacrificing their own well-being to keep everyone else happy. And that process can feel terrifying to the people who benefited from their endless patience. What makes this topic even more interesting is that the darkest phase of an empath's journey often reveals qualities that were hidden for years. Strength replaces hesitation, boundaries replace guilt, clarity replaces confusion. The same person who once struggled to say no suddenly becomes impossible to manipulate. The same person who tolerated toxic behavior suddenly refuses to accept even the smallest form of disrespect. To some people, this new version appears intimidating. To others, it appears cold. But beneath the surface, a much deeper story is unfolding. In this video, you will discover what really causes an empath to reach their breaking point. You will learn about the emotional patterns that slowly push them toward transformation. You will understand why some of the kindest people can suddenly become distant and detached. You will uncover lesser-known psychological truths about emotional burnout, boundary formation, and the hidden cost of carrying other people's pain for too long. Most importantly, you will learn why the moment an empath turns dark is often misunderstood by nearly everyone around them. As this story unfolds, you may begin to recognize behaviors, experiences, and emotional struggles that are rarely discussed openly. You may also discover why many empaths spend years feeling trapped between their desire to help others and their need to protect themselves. By the end of this video, the transformation that once seemed frightening may start to look very different. What appears to be darkness on the outside may actually be the beginning of awareness, strength, and self-respect. So stay with us until the very end, because some of the most powerful insights are still ahead, and the final truth behind an empath's transformation may completely change the way you view kindness, boundaries, and emotional strength. Welcome to the channel. If you enjoy exploring the hidden side of human behavior, deep psychology, and personal growth, make sure to subscribe and join our community for more thought-provoking videos. Now let's uncover the terrifying moment an empath turns dark. One of the biggest misunderstandings about empaths is the belief that they are emotionally limitless. Many people look at an empath and see someone who is always willing to listen, always willing to understand, and always willing to forgive. Because an empath often remains calm during difficult situations, others assume they are unaffected by what happens around them. They mistake patience for invincibility. They mistake kindness for weakness. They mistake understanding for endless tolerance. Over time, this creates a dangerous illusion. People begin to believe that no matter what they do, the empath will always remain the same. They assume there will always be another chance, another conversation, another act of forgiveness, another opportunity to make things right. The empath becomes the emotional safety net that everyone depends on. Whenever problems arise, people turn to them. Whenever conflicts happen, they expect the empath to smooth things over. Whenever mistakes are made, they assume the empath will understand. While this may seem harmless at first, it slowly creates an unhealthy dynamic. The empath becomes known for their ability to absorb emotional pain, and because of that, many people stop paying attention to how much they are carrying. Instead of appreciating their kindness, they begin expecting it. Instead of valuing their patience, they begin relying on it. What was once respected gradually becomes taken for granted. This shift often happens so slowly that nobody notices it. A friend calls only when they need support. A family member unloads their problems without asking how the empath is doing. A partner makes the same mistakes over and over because they know forgiveness will eventually come. None of these actions may seem dramatic on their own, yet when repeated over months and years, they create a pattern. The empath becomes the person everyone leans on, while very few people stop to ask what the empath needs in return. Their emotional generosity becomes expected rather than appreciated. Their compassion becomes a resource that others consume without thinking about the cost. Many empaths do not even realize this is happening because helping others feels natural to them. They find meaning in supporting people. They genuinely care about the well-being of those around them. But caring deeply does not make someone immune to exhaustion. Every act of emotional giving requires energy. Every difficult conversation takes a toll. Every disappointment leaves a mark. While others move on with their lives, the empath often carries emotional weight long after the moment has passed. What many people never see is the hidden burden that comes with being deeply empathetic. Empaths tend to notice emotions that others overlook. They pick up on tension in a room. They sense sadness behind forced smiles. They recognize pain hidden beneath anger. This ability allows them to connect with people on a profound level, but it also comes with a cost. They often absorb emotional energy that does not belong to them. They worry about people long after conversations end. They replay situations in their minds. They wonder if someone is hurting. They think about problems they cannot solve. While others are able to separate themselves from emotional situations, empaths frequently carry those experiences with them. Their minds become crowded with concerns, responsibilities, and feelings that were never theirs to manage. The result is an emotional workload that remains largely invisible. To the outside world, they appear calm. Inside, they may be carrying the stress of multiple people at once. Because empaths rarely complain, many people assume they are handling everything well. They continue showing up, they continue helping, they continue offering support. This creates another misunderstanding. People start believing that the empath enjoys carrying every burden. They fail to recognize that even the strongest person has limits. The empath may smile while struggling. They may offer comfort while feeling exhausted. They may encourage others while secretly feeling drained. Since they do not demand attention, their suffering often goes unnoticed. Their silence is mistaken for strength. Their endurance is mistaken for endless capacity. Yet beneath the surface, emotional pressure continues to build. Unlike people who react immediately when hurt, empaths often absorb pain quietly. They rarely explode at the first sign of disrespect. They rarely end relationships after a single disappointment. Their natural instinct is to understand rather than judge. When someone hurts them, they search for explanations. They try to see the situation from the other person's perspective. Maybe that person was stressed. Maybe they were going through a difficult time. Maybe they did not mean it. This willingness to understand becomes both a gift and a weakness. It allows empaths to maintain relationships through challenges, but it also causes them to tolerate behavior that others would reject much sooner. When someone apologizes, the empath gives another chance. When the same mistake happens again, they offer understanding. When promises are broken, they remain patient. One chance becomes two. Two becomes five. Five becomes 10. The empath continues hoping that things will improve. They continue believing in people's potential. They continue focusing on who someone could become rather than who they currently are. This optimism keeps them invested long after warning signs appear. While others might recognize a pattern and walk away, the empath often stays. Not because they are blind to the problem, but because they genuinely want to believe that people can change. As these experiences accumulate, emotional wounds begin to form. Most of them are small at first. A broken promise here, a moment of disrespect there, an act of selfishness that gets excused. Individually, each incident seems manageable. Collectively, they create something much larger. Emotional pain rarely arrives all at once. It arrives in layers. Each disappointment adds another layer. Each betrayal adds another layer. Each moment of feeling unseen adds another layer. Over time, these layers become heavy. Yet because the process is gradual, neither the empath nor the people around them fully recognize what is happening. Outsiders usually do not notice the damage because empaths are skilled at maintaining appearances. They continue being helpful. They continue being kind. They continue showing up when needed. From the outside, nothing seems different. Inside, however, trust is slowly eroding. Resentment begins forming in places where understanding once existed. Doubt replaces certainty. Emotional fatigue replaces enthusiasm. The empath starts feeling less connected to people who repeatedly take without giving. But instead of expressing these feelings immediately, they often keep them hidden. They convince themselves to be patient a little longer, to wait a little longer, to hope a little longer. This pattern becomes especially dangerous when compassion starts turning into self-destruction. Empaths often place other people's needs above their own. They cancel plans to help someone in crisis. They sacrifice rest to provide emotional support. They ignore their own struggles while focusing on everyone else's problems. At first, these actions seem noble. Society often praises selflessness. People admire those who put others first. However, there is a point where generosity stops being healthy and starts becoming harmful. That point is different for everyone, but the result is often the same. The empath becomes emotionally depleted. Constant emotional giving creates an imbalance. Energy flows outward, but rarely returns. The empath spends hours helping others process their feelings while neglecting their own. They become the counselor, the mediator, the problem solver, and the emotional caretaker. Meanwhile, their own needs remain unanswered. Their own pain remains unaddressed. Their own struggles remain hidden. The more they focus on everyone else, the more disconnected they become from themselves. Gradually, they stop asking an important question. Who is taking care of the person who takes care of everyone else? Another challenge comes from absorbing other people's problems as if they were personal responsibilities. Many empaths feel guilty when they cannot help. They feel responsible for fixing situations that are beyond their control. They carry worries that do not belong to them. They spend emotional energy trying to rescue people who are unwilling to change. This habit creates chronic stress. The empath becomes trapped in a cycle of emotional overinvestment. They care deeply, give generously, and hope for positive outcomes. When those outcomes fail to appear, disappointment follows. Over time, chronic emotional exhaustion begins affecting every part of life. The empath feels tired even after resting. Conversations that once felt meaningful start feeling draining. Activities that once brought joy lose their appeal. Patience becomes harder to maintain. Motivation begins fading. Emotional burnout develops quietly, often without warning. Because empaths are so accustomed to caring for others, they may not realize how depleted they have become until the symptoms become impossible to ignore. As exhaustion grows, trust starts disappearing. Not all at once, but gradually. The empath notices that certain people only appear when they need something. They notice promises that are never kept. They notice patterns they once ignored. Small observations begin connecting together. What once seemed like isolated incidents now reveals a larger picture. The empath starts recognizing that some relationships have been one-sided for years. Some people have been taking advantage of their kindness. Some individuals have mistaken patience for permission. Then comes the moment that changes everything. It does not always arrive during a dramatic argument. It does not always happen after a major betrayal. Sometimes it happens during an ordinary day. A simple conversation, a familiar disappointment, a repeated behavior. Suddenly the empath sees the pattern clearly. All the excuses disappear. All the justifications lose their power. The pieces finally connect. They realize that they have been giving far more than they have been receiving. They realize that certain people never intended to change. They realize that effort alone cannot save a relationship when respect is missing. This realization is often painful because it forces the empath to confront truths they spent years avoiding. They wanted to believe the best in people. They wanted to believe that love, patience, and understanding would eventually create change. But reality presents a different lesson. Love cannot fix someone who refuses responsibility. Kindness cannot heal someone who continues causing harm. Patience cannot transform a person who has no desire to grow. These truths strike deeply because they challenge the empath's core beliefs. At this stage, manipulation becomes easier to recognize. So does disrespect. So does emotional exploitation. Behaviors that once seemed confusing suddenly become obvious. The empath notices guilt trips that were disguised as vulnerability. They notice selfishness hidden behind excuses. They notice relationships built on convenience rather than genuine care. Most importantly, they realize that many people were comfortable receiving endless compassion without offering the same level of consideration in return. The moment this awareness arrives, the empath can no longer see the relationship through the same lens. The illusion is broken. The patterns are visible. The emotional fog begins to clear. And once that happens, continuing as before becomes almost impossible. After the breaking point comes the stage that many people misunderstand the most. It is often called the dark empath phase. The name itself creates confusion because it sounds as if the empath has become cruel, selfish, or emotionally empty. In reality, the transformation is usually much different from what people expect. The empath has spent years giving, understanding, forgiving, and carrying emotional burdens that were never theirs to carry. They have spent years putting other people first. They have spent years convincing themselves to stay patient even when their trust was repeatedly damaged. Once the pattern becomes impossible to ignore, a dramatic shift begins. The empath starts changing from the inside. Their priorities change, their perspective changes, their behavior changes. To people who have known them for years, it can feel as if they are looking at a completely different person. One of the first signs of this transformation is emotional detachment. This is often mistaken for coldness, but it is not the same thing. Emotional detachment does not mean the empath stops feeling. It means they stop allowing every situation to control their emotions. For years, they may have absorbed every problem around them. Every conflict felt personal. Every disappointment affected them deeply. Every emotional storm pulled them in. Now they begin creating distance between themselves and situations that once consumed their energy. They stop carrying responsibilities that belong to other people. They stop making themselves responsible for everyone else's happiness. They stop believing that every problem must become their problem. This change can seem shocking because the empath who once rushed to help now pauses before getting involved. The empath who once stayed awake worrying about other people's choices now understands that not every problem is theirs to solve. The empath who once felt guilty for saying no begins using that word without apologizing for it. The difference is immediate. People who were used to unlimited access suddenly discover limits. People who expected endless emotional support suddenly encounter boundaries. For many empaths, this is the first time in their lives that they truly understand the power of protecting their energy. Strong boundaries begin replacing automatic sacrifice. Before the transformation, boundaries often felt uncomfortable. The empath worried about hurting people's feelings. They worried about disappointing others. They worried about being misunderstood. Because of this, they frequently allowed behavior that crossed personal limits. They tolerated disrespect. They accepted emotional imbalance. They ignored warning signs because they wanted peace. After the transformation, those old habits begin disappearing. The empath starts recognizing that healthy relationships require mutual respect. They understand that kindness without boundaries often becomes self-destruction. Instead of saying yes to everything, they become selective. Instead of constantly adjusting themselves to fit other people's expectations, they begin honoring their own needs. Along with stronger boundaries comes a reduced tolerance for dishonesty. For years, the empath may have given people the benefit of the doubt. They overlooked inconsistencies. They ignored excuses. They accepted explanations that did not fully make sense because they wanted to believe in the best version of people. After the transformation, their perspective changes. They begin paying attention to actions instead of promises. They stop focusing on what people say and start focusing on what people repeatedly do. Empty words lose their power. Manipulation becomes easier to recognize. Excuses stop sounding convincing. The empath no longer feels obligated to ignore reality in order to preserve relationships. This creates another major shift. Endless forgiveness begins disappearing. That does not mean the empath becomes unforgiving. It means forgiveness is no longer automatic. In the past, forgiveness may have arrived before accountability. The empath forgave because they wanted peace. They forgave because they understood pain. They forgave because they hoped people would change. Now, forgiveness becomes more thoughtful. It becomes connected to responsibility, effort, and genuine growth. The empath no longer confuses forgiveness with allowing repeated harm. They no longer see endless chances as proof of kindness. They understand that protecting themselves is just as important as understanding others. To people who benefited from the old version of the empath, this transformation can feel frightening. The person who once accepted everything suddenly starts rejecting behavior that once passed without consequence. The person who always made excuses now asks difficult questions. The person who was always available now becomes selective with their time and energy. For individuals who are accustomed to receiving unlimited understanding, this change can feel threatening. They may accuse the empath of becoming selfish. They may claim the empath has changed for the worse. They may insist that the empath is no longer the person they used to be. In one sense, they are correct. The empath is no longer the same person, but the change is not necessarily negative. What they are witnessing is often the removal of unhealthy patterns that existed for years. The empath is no longer operating from guilt, fear, or emotional obligation. They are making decisions from a place of awareness. For those who relied on weak boundaries, this awareness can feel uncomfortable because it disrupts the dynamic that once benefited them. Friends and family often react strongly to this change. Some support it, some respect it, others struggle to understand it. The people who truly care about the empath's well-being usually recognize the transformation as growth. They understand that healthier boundaries are necessary. They respect the empath's need for balance, but not everyone reacts this way. Some people become frustrated. They wonder why the empath is no longer as available as before. They question why certain behaviors are no longer tolerated. They become confused when the empath stops sacrificing themselves for everyone else's comfort. This reaction reveals an important truth. Many relationships are tested when boundaries appear. As long as the empath was giving endlessly, there was little resistance. Once limits are introduced, people's true expectations become visible. Some individuals respect the new boundaries immediately. Others attempt to push against them. Some become angry because they no longer receive the same level of emotional access. These reactions often tell the empath more about the relationship than years of interaction ever did. One of the most noticeable changes during this period is that the empath stops over-explaining. In the past, they may have spent hours trying to make everyone understand their decisions. They felt responsible for managing other people's reactions. They justified their choices. They defended their boundaries. They explained themselves repeatedly. After the transformation, this behavior begins fading. The empath realizes that not everyone needs an explanation. Not everyone is entitled to endless clarification. They understand that a healthy boundary does not require universal approval. This creates another surprising effect. The empath stops chasing people. For years, they may have been the one initiating conversations, repairing conflicts, and maintaining connections. They put effort into relationships that others neglected. They carried responsibilities that should have been shared equally. Eventually, they stop. They stop pursuing people who consistently show little effort. They stop trying to force relationships that no longer serve a healthy purpose. They stop proving their worth to individuals who never fully appreciated it. The empath also stops rescuing people. This can be one of the most difficult changes because helping others has often been a central part of their identity. However, experience teaches them an important lesson. Some people do not want solutions. Some people do not want growth. Some people simply want someone else to carry the consequences of their choices. The empath begins recognizing this difference. They understand that support is valuable, but enabling destructive behavior is not. They learn that saving people who refuse to save themselves only leads to exhaustion. As a result, self-sacrifice begins disappearing as well. The empath no longer believes that suffering is a requirement for love. They no longer view constant giving as proof of loyalty. They stop measuring their value by how much they endure. Instead, they start asking different questions. Is this relationship healthy? Is respect present? Is effort mutual? Is trust being maintained? These questions become important because they shift the focus away from endless tolerance and toward genuine balance. At this point, many people claim that the empath has become cold. The reality is far more complicated. The empath has not stopped caring. They have simply stopped caring at the expense of themselves. This distinction is important because caring and sacrificing are not the same thing. Understanding and tolerating abuse are not the same thing. Compassion and self-neglect are not the same thing. For years, these boundaries may have been blurred. Now they become clear. The truth about the so-called dark side is that it is often an awakening rather than a decline. What appears dark from the outside frequently feels liberating from the inside. The empath begins seeing situations with greater clarity. They stop viewing relationships through idealized expectations. They start accepting reality as it is rather than as they wish it would be. This awareness changes everything. Decisions become easier, priorities become clearer, emotional energy becomes more intentional. There is also an important difference between bitterness and wisdom. Bitterness is rooted in unresolved pain. Wisdom is rooted in understanding. A bitter person may distrust everyone because of past experiences. A wise person learns from experience without allowing it to destroy their ability to connect. The empath's transformation often involves this distinction. They are not shutting down emotionally. They are learning how to protect themselves while remaining open to healthy relationships. The same principle applies to revenge and self-protection. Revenge focuses on causing harm. Self-protection focuses on preventing harm. These motivations may look similar from a distance, but they are completely different. The transformed empath is usually not interested in punishing people. They are interested in preserving their peace. They are interested in avoiding patterns that once drained them. They are interested in creating a life where their energy is invested wisely rather than wasted repeatedly. As this stage continues, a new process begins. The empath starts rebuilding self-respect. For many, this journey is long because years of people-pleasing often weaken the connection with personal needs. They must relearn what they value. They must rediscover what makes them feel safe, respected, and fulfilled. This process requires honesty. It requires reflection. It requires letting go of beliefs that once kept them trapped in unhealthy situations. Healthy boundaries become part of everyday life. The empath learns that saying no does not make them cruel. Taking time for themselves does not make them selfish. Walking away from harmful situations does not make them heartless. These lessons create a stronger foundation for future relationships. Instead of giving trust automatically, they give it carefully. Instead of ignoring red flags, they pay attention to them. Instead of hoping people will change, they evaluate who people consistently show themselves to be. Relationships become more intentional as well. The empath starts choosing quality over quantity. They become more selective about who receives their energy. They invest in people who demonstrate respect, honesty, and reciprocity. They stop chasing connections built entirely on obligation. This does not make their world smaller, it makes it healthier. The relationships that remain often become stronger because they are built on mutual effort rather than one-sided sacrifice. At the same time, emotional strength continues developing. The empath learns how to remain compassionate without becoming vulnerable to exploitation. They learn how to care deeply without carrying responsibilities that belong to others. They learn how to support people without abandoning themselves in the process. This balance is one of the most important lessons of the entire transformation. It allows them to keep their kindness while protecting their well-being. It allows them to remain empathetic without becoming emotionally consumed by every situation around them. Gradually, the person who once felt overwhelmed by the weight of everyone else's expectations begins standing firmly in their own sense of worth, making decisions from confidence rather than guilt, and building a future shaped by awareness, strength, and a much deeper understanding of what healthy compassion truly means. The terrifying moment is not when an empath becomes dark. The terrifying moment is when they finally see the truth. It is the moment they stop making excuses for people who continuously hurt them. The moment they stop sacrificing their own peace to keep everyone else comfortable. The moment they realize that kindness should never require self-destruction. For years, many empaths give their time, energy, loyalty, and emotional support without asking for much in return. They forgive more than most people ever will. They carry burdens that do not belong to them. They continue believing in people long after others would have walked away. But eventually, a lesson arrives that changes everything. They learn that not everyone values a kind heart. Not Not everyone respects patience. Not everyone deserves unlimited access to their compassion. And when that lesson finally sinks in, the empath begins to change. The people most shocked by this transformation are often the ones who benefited from the empath's silence, the ones who became comfortable with endless second chances, the ones who mistook kindness for weakness and understanding for permission. From the outside, it may look like the empath has become cold, but the truth is very different. They have simply stopped abandoning themselves. They have stopped shrinking their needs. They have stopped carrying responsibilities that were never theirs to carry. And perhaps the most powerful truth of all is this: an empath's darkest moment is often the beginning of their strongest chapter. It is the chapter where they stop chasing approval and start choosing self-respect. The chapter where boundaries replace guilt, where awareness replaces confusion, where strength and compassion finally learn to exist together. If this message resonated with you, or if you've witnessed this transformation in yourself or someone you know, let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe to the channel for more deep insights into human behavior, psychology, relationships, and personal growth. Thank you for watching, and remember, protecting your light does not make you dark. Sometimes it is the brightest thing you can do.